Hello everyone and welcome to an interesting project. Today we are going to be creating a random user generator application using React JavaScript, and we're going to be using the randomuser.me API, which is a free open source API for generating random user data. It's like lorem ipsum but for people. And of course these are just submissions done by people all over the world, and of course the data that is returned is I want to say mostly not real, but I can't be quite sure. As you can see, this email is a fake email, and you can see there's no way this guy is about, what's it, about 70 years or something. It's all random data, but it's a pretty nice project if you want to get started with the React and fetching data from an API. And you can use Ajax, but we're not going to be using Ajax. We're going to be using React JavaScript and the Fetch API to fetch our data. I was thinking about using Axios, but I'm not really all that proficient in Axios, so I'm just going to stick with the Fetch API for now, and probably maybe near the end I'll try and implement Axios, but I'm not making any promises. So this is the API that we're going to be using, and the result that we should get is something similar to this. So we are getting the results, then we're getting the gender, the name, the title, the first name, everything that is inside here. Now the reason why I chose this API specifically is because it offers quite a challenge in terms of accessing the array itself inside our JSON data, and then accessing the objects inside the array itself, because as you can see, it contains multiple layers. So I'm going to show you a few ways, actually two ways only, where we can use dot notation to access the values inside the objects, and where we just use our curly brackets. And then I'll just leave it up to you to choose which one is easier for you, because it's all about preference really. Now I had done something similar in the morning where I committed everything to GitHub, and the repository is github.com/sancthomas/random-user. So the repository is called random user. Now I'm going to create a new application, and then I'm going to also create a new repository for it, so that in case you don't know how to commit changes to GitHub, then you can also learn how to create a repository and commit changes to GitHub from your local environment without using a drag and drop, which is also an option. So in the README, there are a few things I want to go through. Of course, this is the API. I'm going to just open it in a new page, and then we're going to do this in the project, so I'm not going to go through it. So in order to get started, we need to run npx create react app, which will canvas our React application. So just to show you what I did right here, in my command prompt on Windows, you can do Windows key +R, which will open up this run window, and if you type in cmd, then it will open a command prompt for you, and of course I zoomed in. So in your command prompt, you can set it to wherever you would like your application to live. So if, for example, if you wanted to live in the desktop, you can cd into the desktop, or you can to go out, you just say cd and then space and dot dot. If you wanted the application to live in your videos folder, for example, you do that anywhere you'd want really, but my preference is usually the desktop, because that's the fastest place that I can access it with. So from the desktop, you can say npx create react -app, and then call it whatever you want, whatever name you want, as long as it's not uppercase. So once you call the name, for example, random user application, once you click enter and this begins to run, it will create a folder for the random user application, and then it will create a React app inside the folder. So I don't want this to run, so I'm just going to stop it. Okay, I'm going to stop it, and then once this finishes running, it will ask you to cd into the name of your application. So if I were to cd into random user application, of course nothing will happen because I don't currently have this folder in my desktop. So if I press enter, I say it's actually there. So once you do that, you can say code and dot, which will open Visual Studio Code in your in that folder, or if you're using Atom, you can say atom dot, and then if you're using any other text editor, I guess drag and drop, because I don't know the commands for the other editors. You can just drag and drop. So that's basically what I did inside here, and you can see I gave it one very long and convoluted command. Okay, I don't know, it's appearing up here, but you can say I just cd it into my desktop, and then once I cd into my desktop, I create the React application, which I called random user dash API. And then once this finishes running, I say cd into the random user API and open Visual Studio Code. So that's basically what this is. So once that is done, you'll find that I opened Visual Studio Code, which is this right here. So this is my application. This is everything that Create React App offers on the initial bootstrapping. So we have the public folder with all this inside, and then we have our source folder with this. So before we get started, I just want to run npm start, which will spin up our development server, right? And then I want to grab Tailwind CDN from cdnjs.org because that's what we're going to be using in our application for our styling. So let me close this, and let me close this as well, so that I can open this and say cdnjs.com, and then just search for Tailwind CSS, and then grab this, the link tag. So copy the link tag and then go into your public folder, and inside your index.html, you can, let me close the sidebar, you can just paste it before the title right there. Now I want to perform some cleanup because I don't like all these comments inside here. So I'm just going to select all of this, delete that, and then grab all of this, delete that. And then for the title, I'm going to say random user generator in React.js, and then say random user API, for example. And then I'm just going to copy this so that I can replace this description right here, like that. So let me just place a comment here and say remember to change theme color, so that I actually remember to change this. So now I can close that down, and then I can go into my source folder. So this is my React application running, and then I can close this, and I can what's this? Let me see. Let me open this API. It should open. Something's wrong. Okay, there you go. Sometimes it does that. The reason it does that is because of cross origin something policy, which doesn't allow you access. I'm sure we'll run into that error in a moment once we start building our application. I've forgotten what the error actually is, so once we run into it, then I'm going to show you. So as you can see, this is basically what we are getting back from this if you're using Ajax or whatever, but we're also going to log this so I can show you from within our application. So I'm just going to close this tab, and then once this opens like that, I'm going to open this to the side, and then I'm going to break our application a little bit because I want to delete the app CSS because we don't need it. So delete this, and then in app.js I'm going to delete this, and then I'm going to delete everything inside here and only return an empty fragment, React fragment, sorry, not an empty fragment. And then inside here I'm just going to say an h1 saying random user, like that. Okay, so once we save that, then I want to change this into an arrow function. So I'm just going to say const app equals to this, which equals an arrow function, like that. And then above this I'm going to say import react from react, like that. And once you save that, then this should update. What's happening? This should update, I think so. There you go. So random user. And the reason why this appears like a paragraph and not an actual h1 is because we have Tailwind CDN, which applies some default stylings to everything basically. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is let me see, we don't need this file. Okay, so let's just begin building application. So I'm going to go into my source folder, and I'm going to create a new file. It's only basically one file that we need, so I don't want to create a components folder. So I'm going to call this file users.js, like that. And then inside this file I'm going to just generate a React arrow function component. So I'm going to say RAFCE, like that. Oops. like that, and this is coming from my extension called ES7 React Redux GraphQL and React Native Snippets. So you can just install this, and then you'll be able to do the shorthand property called RAFCE for a React arrow function component, which exports it by default. And then inside this, I'm going to return a fragment first of all, and then we need to do a few things. First of all, I need to get this API, the link to the API, and so I'm just going to copy it from this address bar, so copy. And then below this, I'm going to set up a variable called URL, and I'm just going to set it into some backticks like that. So this is the API that we're going to be running the fetch API from the browser, which will then generate these results for us. Okay, so I'm going to say, first of all, we need to set up our state values. So I'm going to say, let me say, should I have called this users? Let me rename this to fetch users. Fetch users. The reason I'm renaming this to fetch users is because I would like my state value to be called users. So once my state value is called users, I don't want it to conflict with my actual component. So let me also rename this. Let me rename this to fetch users like that, so that inside my state values, I'm going to say users and set users like that. And this will be coming from react.useState, and we're going to pass in an empty array, because once we fetch our data, then we're going to pass it into this value, which will then populate our state value right there. Now this was showing you one way in which you can use useState, but I don't like doing this. So another way you can do that is by importing it at the top and saying import it in as a named import by placing curly brackets and saying useState. And another React hook that we're going to need is useEffect, which will actually be running our function to fetch the data. So once you do this, then you no longer need to do this, so you can just delete this. And then the next thing that I want to do immediately is set up my useEffect to fetch our data. So I'm going to say useEffect and set up my callback function. And then deliberately, I'm not going to set up my empty array, because I want to show you what it does. So I'm going to leave it empty, which might break our application just a bit. So let me just open the my developer tools right there and open the console. And then I want to fetch my data inside the useEffect. So I'm going to say, let me call this function fetch user data. And I want this function to be asynchronous. So I'm going to say async like that. Set up my arrow function, and I'm going to say const response equals await, and then we're now calling the fetch API. So we are fetching the JSON data from our URL, which you have right here. If you don't want to do this, then you can instead do this. You can just copy this and then just paste it inside there. It's basically the same thing as doing this, but I prefer to set up my variable right there. Okay, so say URL, and then we're going to say const users. Now users, because that's our state value that we want to populate, so users equals to await response.json. So await the JSON response, and then we need to now pass in the data that we get into our function. I'm also going to do something deliberate inside here, a deliberate mistake, so that I show you how to fix it. So once we do that, we can actually log our data to the console. So log users, which will not really log anything, but in my return inside here, let me just return an h1 saying let me say users component. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to import this file in my app.js, and I'm going to say import fetch users from fetch users right there. And then in order to use it, just delete this, and then just call this as, what am I doing? Call this fetch users like that. So let me save that, and let's see what we get. And you can see users is assigned a value but never used, blah 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 blah. Okay, and the reason for that is actually because I didn't call this function. Let me just do that, and let me do that and then explain what I wanted to do. So fetch user data like that, save that, and then yeah, there you go. So this is the error that I was talking about. access to fetch this data. Actually, this API that we're using is a free API, but sometimes it does this. I don't know why it does this. It says access to this API from localhost has been blocked because of cross-origin, what's it called? Cross-origin something policy. So no access control, and then so all you have to do is just reload, which will it should get rid of that error. And you can see once, because we are logging our users right here, we get an array. Sorry, we get an object. First of all, you get an object with the results array inside, because the results is the name of the array. If we look at our API, that's basically what we would expect, because we get an object and then one array, which is the results array, which ends right here. I think so. Yes, it ends right here. So that's what we would expect, but technically we can't really access this data. Okay, we can't really access this data. So what we need to do is go inside the array actually. So we can do that by saying set users right here and set users into the results array like that. So that now once we log our users, it should wait a minute. Where is it? Log the users.results. Let's see that. Okay, there you go. So that now you see we get our the actual array that we want, which has our actual data. Now I don't know whether you notice, but you can see that we're only calling the console log once, yet it has run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and then the 8th time which failed because of the cause policy. Now the reason why it does that is because there is no dependency that is controlling the useEffect, so it will run continuously and continuously and continuously. So in order to stop that, you have to pass in an empty dependency array, which means that it will only run on the initial render. So it will only run once, and it won't be blotting your application. So once I reload this, you'll notice that oops, I didn't save this. Let me save that and reload this. So once I reload this, you notice that it only runs once and then it just stops right there. So this is basically what we want, and that's the reason why we have an empty dependency array right there. Now this is one way of calling the fetch API to fetch your data. Let me get rid of this console log because we don't technically need it. So this is one way of calling of fetching your data, but I don't like doing this because, as you've seen, I usually forget to call the function inside here. So what I'd like to do is I place this outside the useEffect like that, and then only call my function inside the useEffect like that. I like it much better like that because I tend to forget less to call this my function. But it's all technically your preference, so you do whatever you want, we do whatever pleases you. Okay, so now we need to figure out how we can access the values inside here so that we can now display our data. One thing that I've just realized I forgot to do is I forgot to install React icons, and then as you can see, this date technically it's a bit harder to read in this form. But if you're a developer, you used to such days, you can easily, this is 8th of April of 1959, but you know, it's not technically what you would expect everyone to know how to do. So in order to fix this, we're going to be using an npm package called Moment.js. So let me just go ahead and install it right away before I forget. So inside my terminal, I'm just going to add a new terminal right there, and I'm going to say npm install. First of all, I want to install React icons, so React icons -- save, and then I want to install Moment.js, so the package is called Moment, and I'm going to say -- save as well. So while this is installing, let me go through what Moment.js does. So just Google Moment.js like that, and if you go to the first momentjs.com, the first search results, this is their website, and you can download Moment.js, but we are actually doing npm install moment -- save, so this is what I'm doing. And then in order to format the dates, because technically if you look at this, at our data, we are getting the year, the day, and then the month, and then the time, which you don't technically need because it's a date of birth. So in order to format dates like that, it says moment, then you pass in the date inside here, then you call the format method, and you define in which way you want your date to appear in terms of the user interface. So for example, this will be the full month, the day, and the full year, and then the hours, the minutes, the seconds, and everything else, whether it's AM or PM. As you can see, this is just a demonstration of what we get back. And then you can also say the day only, so that you only return the day, or the month, the date, and the year, but this is the shortened form, as you can see. And this escape, I'm not sure what it does, but then this format basically returns everything, as you can see, just like that, which is not technically what we want to appear to our users. So we're going to be using this instead, without the hours, minutes, and the seconds. So once that finishes installing, I'm going to show you how we are going to use it in our application. One thing I've just remembered is that if you go to the npm docs for Moment.js right here, for the npm.js, you'll notice that the project status says Moment.js is a legacy project now in maintenance mode. In most cases, you should choose a different library. So I would follow this advice, but technically this is only a small project. It's only for showcase, so I think using Moment.js in this case should be fine. So we're just going to use Moment.js, but technically they say that you should choose a different library in case you want to format your dates. Okay, so let's just place that back to the side, and then we can now begin on how to access this data. Okay, so obviously, as you know, the trend, once we fetch our data, we want to map over our data, and then start displaying everything that we would want. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a section right there. And as you can see, let me just explain something else. The set users function right here is the function that controls our state value right there. And because we have set it to the users.results, then technically it has populated this. That's why when we do a console log on the users, we get back the data that we would want. So what we want to do now is map over these users, because these users have now been populated. The user state value has now been populated with the users.results array, which is this that we get in the console. So I'm going to say inside this, I want to return, first of all, I want to map over my data. So I'm going to place curly brackets, and I'm going to say users.map. And then for every user, I want to do a return first of all. And yes, I realize I've left out destructuring here. So destructuring, I've left it out on purpose so that I can show you how we can access the values without destructuring. And then I'm going to say return, first of all, I want to return a div, right? And you all know that because we're returning a list, then the div has to have a key prop, a unique key prop. And for the key prop for us, we are going to be using the UUID, which is found in the login. So in order to access this UUID, we need to go into the login object, which is inside the results array. So we can do that by saying, because we are mapping over the data, so I'm going to say user, and then dot, which means go into the results array, so which is technically already what we have. So I want to access the login value, so I'm going to say dot login, and then the login value, the login object, sorry, not value, the login object has another object inside it with a key of UUID, which is what we want. So I'm going to say dot UUID, like that. And then below this, I want to return the name of the person, so I'm going to return an h3. And as you can tell, let me place this to the side so that I don't keep switching windows. As you can tell, what you want to do is go into the user right there. So we can just begin to write it out and say user dot, and then we want to go into the name object, so user dot name, and then inside the name object we want the title, the first name, and the last name. So this is a bit as you can tell, it's a bit bulky to handle, but let me just do it so that you can see why we use the other method. So I'm going to say dot title, and this is Mr., Mrs., or Miss, as you can tell. So technically how it appears is Mr., then full stop, then we can say we want the first name, so we do the whole spiel again, and we can say user dot name dot first, right? And then last name, we can say user dot what's dot name dot last, like that. So let me save this, and then we can go back to our application, and you can see we get the user, the title, which is Mr., and then the first name, and then the last name, which is right there. Now notice that this is a random user API, so every time we reload or every time we save this, it's going to reload the application, and it's going to, you know, generate another random user, as you can see right there. Okay, so as you can excuse me, as you can tell, this is a very long process to go through. So how would we destructure this? That is the question that now comes to mind. So I'm going to go below this, and I'm going to say, obviously we want to say set up our value, which is equal to the user variable that we've just created right there. And then inside this, we want to do a few things. Let me go back to the API so that you can see what I'm doing hand in hand like that. And in order to access this title, for example, when we're destructuring, we can just say, first of all, we want to go into the results, which is, we're already in the results, so we don't need to repeat it. So I want to first access the gender, for example, which is only one key with a value right there. But then when you go to the name, it has 3 values inside it. So how would I destructure the name? I would say name, and then place a full colon, and then place curly brackets, which means now I'm accessing the name and then the values inside the name. So I can now access title like that, and then first, and then last like that. That's how I would access them. And then just to make this simpler, now you can come and change this. You can just Control D on this, which will access all of them. And then when you when you delete them and then save, the application still behaves the same way. It still returns the title, the first name, and the last name, because we have destructured, and you can see it's already much easier. Now, in case you don't understand how this works, just think of it in this way. We are technically writing this as it appears right here, but without the quotation marks. Now, what do I mean? I mean this. If you come here and place this to the next line, come here and place this to the next line, and this to the next line, and then this to the next line, what happens? You find that now the data that we're destructuring appears like the object that we want. As you can see, the name appears there, the name appears there, the full colon is there, the full colon is there, then the curly brackets, the curly brackets. Then what value do we want from that object? We want the title, the first name, we want the first name, and the last name, the last name. So in case you don't understand, this is an easy way to remember it. And of course, as you can guess, we want the location next. So if I want to access the location, the values inside the location object, I would say location, right? And then place a full colon. And just to make it easy, I'm going to structure it as it is inside here. So I'm going to say place a curly brackets and then go to the next line. And then inside the location is a street value, right? And the street value also has some values inside it. So place a full colon. You place a full colon and then some curly brackets, just like that, and you can see the street has the values, the key values of number and name. So you can just say number, place a comma, and then name, like that. And then the city is still inside the location but outside the street. So I just need to go outside the street, which ends here, as I can see, and then just say the city is what I want next, then the state, then the country, then the postcode. Now I'm not going to be using all this data. I'm just showing you that we can destructure all of it if we wanted. And then I'm going to say coordinates, like that, and the coordinates has some values inside it, so I can just say colon and then place my curly brackets inside once again and say latitude and longitude, like that. And then time zone is outside of the coordinates, so I need to go outside the coordinates like that and say time zone. And because time zone has some values inside, I'm going to say offset, like that. And then description, like that. And as you can see, it looks a bit difficult at first, but it may seem a bit difficult at first, but once you get the hang of how it's destructured, you just realize it just looks exactly like the JSON data that you're getting back. As you can see, it's very easy once you get the hang of it. Now the next thing that I want to do is get my email. So the next thing I want to access is the email, which falls outside of the location object, as you can see. So all I have to do right here is check where my location objects end, which is this yellow curly bracket right there, and just go outside the location and say email, because email doesn't have other values inside it. And then now I want to access the login, so log in, and then the login has UUID, which is this right here. That I need to replace now because I have now destructured it right there. So I'm going to remove this, right? So UUID, as you can see, VS Code has syntax highlighting. So every time that I use a variable that I already defined, then it lights up. If I were to remove this, notice that it seems a bit grayed out. So UUID like that. And then from the login, I also want to get the username of the person. So I'm just going to say UUID and then say username like that. And then once you get the login, the next thing that I want to do is get the date of birth. So I need to go outside of the login and say date of birth, so DOB like that. And then the date of birth has some objects inside it, so I'm going to say date. I want the date, and then I want the age like that. And then the next thing that I want to do is get the phone number of the person, right? So the phone number is outside of the date of birth, so I need to go outside this and call the phone number like that. And then I want to get the picture of the person, so the picture is outside the date of birth, as you can tell. So all I need to do is say I want the picture, right? And for the picture I want the large one, so I'm going to destruct it once again even further and say I want the large one right there. So as you can tell, it's quite a bit to work through, but this is not we are not going to be displaying all this data, so I'm just showing you that we can do anything that we want with this right there. Okay, so let's start displaying our data, because that's technically all that we need from this API. So I can now close this, right? And then I can place this back to the side, and I can close this, and then I can have this open right there. Okay, looking very nice. So let's see how do we want to do. First, the first thing that I want to do is return my image, right? The image which you get from picture right there. So image source, the source will be large right there because it's a link to the thumbnail image. And then for the alt, in case the image fails to load, all I want to do is display the first name of the person, which is coming from the first that we destructured at the top right there. And then once you get our image, then I want to display the name of the person, which is this right here. And then below the name of the person, I want to have a paragraph that says their age, and their age is coming from this right there. And then actually before the paragraph, let me have another paragraph that says date of birth had what? Date right there. Now let me just save this so that I can show you the problem that we'll have. Oops, what have I done? Oh, it's the my formatter. So if you have Prettier installed, it will format out things for you, as you can see right there. Now the problem that we have right now is that this date is actually unreadable. It's actually unreadable. At first glance you can already tell that this is the year, but then when it gets further inwards, you can tell that this is not what you would want someone to read. And actually for this age, let me add years after this, that we know that it's an age value, so 74 years. So in order to deal with this date, actually I think I'm going to deal with it last. Let me just deal with how this displays, and now I can delete this H1 at the top, so I can remove this. And then inside this section, I want to give this a class name, because we're using Tailwind CSS. I want to give this a class name of BG Gray-900, which is almost a navy bluish, right? And then I'm not going to place it to a full 100 viewport heights yet, because I'm not sure what kind of data we will be displaying right here, or how much space it will take on the window. But I'm just going to say text white, and notice that every time I save it, fetches the data anew, which is why it's reloading. So don't worry if you have different people on screen. It's basically all you need now right now is just the styling. And then what I want to do, I want to say that I want this image to be on the center, so I can go inside this image right here, give this a class name of block, and say margin on the x-axis to auto, which will center it like that. And then I'm going to go inside this section and give padding on the y of 20, which will push it down just a bit. And then I'm going to say padding on the x of 10, which will push this inwards like that. So inside this div, this div that we're returning our data, I want to go inside this div, give this a class name, and I'm going to say this class name should be bg, let's say gray dash 200. Okay, it messes up. I should have placed text white here, so let me just remove that like that. And then inside this div, once again, I want this to push inwards, so I'm going to say padding on the x of, let's say 5, and then give the class of rounded large so that it has rounded corners, right? And then I'm going to say padding on the y of 10, so padding on the top and bottom of this container. So once I save that, this happens. So it's looking nice. Okay, just to add a flag so that we know what this is, I'm going to add here DOB, which means date of birth, right there. And then I'm going to place this inside a span, right? So span like that. And the reason for the span is because I want to go inside this span and give this a class name of font bold, right, which will make it bolder just a bit. And I've just remembered that I wanted a custom font from Google Fonts, which I have the link right here. And the font that I want is called Robotoslab right here. And I'm going to grab the regular 400 and the 700. So I'm just going to grab the import right there, and I'm going to place it inside my index.CSS at the top right there. And then I'm going to remove this and remove this and remove this and change this font family to Roboto Slab and a fallback of sans serif like that. Okay, as you can see, our font already changes. Okay, so that's working nice. We don't really need to do anything else in this CSS file. We only need to change the font. And let's see. I want this to be text aligned to the center, right? So what I'm going to do is from the H3 and the paragraph and this paragraph, I'm going to grab all of this and place this inside a div so that I can go inside this div and say text center, which will text align to the center like that. And then I want this H3 to be bigger, so I'm going to go inside the H3, go inside the H3, give this a class name of text, let's say 3XL. Let's say margin on the Y of 3, so margin on the top and bottom like that. And then we can say actually this looks fine, right? Okay, let me add something here and underline here. So let me go back into my index CSS, and then I'm going to create a class of underline, and I'm going to say this should have a width of, let's say 35 pixels and a height of 3 pixels and a background color of, let's say 222. Okay, and then I'm going to say actually I think that's fine. The reason why I have this is because I want to have an underline right there, and you'll see it in a moment. Below this this paragraph right here, I'm going to add a div with a class of underline like that. And once I save that, you should have this right there, but I don't want it to appear on the left, so I'm going to go inside this and I'm going to say margin on the x of auto, which should now center it like that. And then margin on the y, let me say of 5, so that it pushes away from this, from both the top and the bottom. Now once we have that, then the next thing that we want to display, let me just look at my data. We want this gender isn't really necessary, so I'm going to remove it. Like I said, we're not going to use all the data that we destructured. I just wanted to show you that we can actually destructure everything if we wanted to. So I'm going to remove this data. We're going to need the city, the state, the street name, the coordinates, the time zone. Let me just see, let's see. I need to return the email, right? And then I need to return the username as well, and then the phone Okay, so in order to do that, let me just check where this div ends. I want to be outside this div, right? So outside this div, and I'm going to say return another div, and this div first of all will have, I've already forgotten, we want our email, right? So email, and then below the email we want the username and the phone. So paragraph, call the username, and then another paragraph, another paragraph, and call the phone, like that. And then just so that this isn't left hanging all the while, just say phone and say username, and this say email, like that, which should have this right there. Okay, but then I realized that I want to return icons for each of these, right? For the username, the icon, for the username, the phone, and the email. So that's the reason why I installed React icons. Okay, so in order to use a React icons, we can just import the icons that we would want to use. So for example, I want to use a phone icon, so I'm going to say import fa phone, and this is coming from React icons. And remember, React icons is a combination of many libraries, so you have to specify where that icon is found, and this is coming from the font awesome icon, so /fa, like that. And in order to use it, all I have to do is now just call it right here as a component, because it's a React component, and I'm going to say fa phone, like that, and it should appear right there. So the phone icon appears right there. Now for the email, I want to use an envelope icon. Or you know what, let me just go to React icons, React icons website, which is this right here, and then I can search for email, which will give me some very nice options for email, and I'm going to take this one. And as you can see, it's a combination of all these libraries, so you have to specify. As you can see, this is coming from AI outline mail, which is design icons. So once you click this, it automatically copies to the keyboard, to the clipboard, sorry, not the keyboard. And then I can say import, and then just paste that in. Oops. Paste this in. This is coming from react-icons/AI. And if you're wondering why I'm not importing this on the same line, it's because they're coming from different libraries, as you can see. And then the final thing that I want is the username. Let me see, what is a good icon for username? Username. Let's say user. I can use this fa user alt. So just copy that. And because this is coming from the same library as the fa font from the font awesome library, you can just place a comma and just paste that in. And then in order to use this, of course, you just have to call them in as functions, as components, sorry. So fa user alt, and the email is AI outline mail, like that. So I can save that, and I can go back into my application, and we will have this. So it's looking nice, but then you can see the styling breaks up just a bit. So in order to fix that, all you need to do is just display flex on the paragraphs. So I can select multiple paragraphs by selecting the first paragraph I want, and then holding down Alt key, and then clicking on the next paragraph, and then still holding on Alt, you can just click on the next paragraph, which allows you to place multiple cursors. So each of these will have a class name of flex items center, right? So let me just save that so that you see how it looks. So it goes like that, and then obviously you don't want them to be you want to have some space between them, so I'm just going to go below this right there. And for the icon, I'm going to give this a class name of margin right, so margin right of 1, which should space it out just a bit, let's say 2, like that. And let me just make these icons bigger. Let me just say text XL. Yeah, just make the icons bigger. And of course, I want now the paragraphs to be spaced out a bit, because these are, it's just looking very crowded. So I'm just, with my multiple cursors, once again, I'm just going to go up, and I'm going to say margin on the Y, let's say a margin of 3, which should space it out like that. So it's looking nice, looking nice. Okay, And then I've just realized this image, I don't want this image to be square, so I want it to be rounded. So I can go inside my image, and right after this class name I can say rounded dash full, which is the Tailwind CSS to have a rounded image, as you can see right there. So it's looking nice, looking nice. So what do we need next? Now we just need to display the location details of each person right there. So let me just go below this div. Is it this div? Yes, it's this div. So below this div, create another div, and then for this div I'm going to have you know what, let me just make this easier for myself. On VS Code you can have this open to the side by holding down control and then backslash, so that it does this. Or if you don't know the command for your for whatever operating system you're using, you can just go right here and you can see it will show you the command that you would want, or you can just click it like that. And then now that this is right there, I can now just go to the bottom of this and say I want to get the street name and everything else. So this will be in form of a list, of course. So I'm going to say I want to return a UL with the list items. Oops, with the list items. How many? 1 2 3 4 5 6. Oops, no, this is 1. Then 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. This is 8, so 8. And I'm going to say first of all this should be street, and then comma, and then name, which will display which will not street but number, sorry, which will display this, it will display the street number and then the name of the street, right? And then for the next one I want to display what city they're in, and then the third one I want to display the state they're in, and then finally the country. And you can just see we are going down the list. So we want to get the postcode, and then we want to get the latitude. Oops, this should be inside curly brackets. So latitude, and then longitude, and then for the time zone I want the offset of set. Oops, and then comma, and then the description. So if you look in the API that we're using, the offset is like, for example, GMT +3 or Pacific Standard Time +8, or you know, something like that. And then the description is the actual time zone that you're in, like Nairobi, Alaska, you know, Tanzania, or whatever. So that's basically what we are returning right here. So I want to return the offset, the time offset from the GMT, and then the description, so where they are. So that's why I have this comma, which is the same for this right there. So let me save this, and then I can now close this, and then we can see our application, and you can see this is not technically what we want, so we need to add some few markers to show that to show what the actual details represent. So I'm going to say street, right, which will say street right there, and then I'm going to say city. Actually I should have started with country, so just move it to the top, and then country, city, state. Which comes first? Is it state or city? It doesn't matter. Let me just save that. And I'm going to say country, and I'm going to say city, and then state, and then postal code, and then latitude, and then longitude, like that. Let's save that, and we will have this. And obviously I want this to appear a bit better, so I'm going to grab all of this. I want it to appear in terms of like a darker font, or a bolder font. So I'm going to grab this, place it inside a span like that. Grab this, place it inside a span. Grab this, span. Grab this, span. This, span. This, span, and finally this, and span. Now I'm going to select all of these spans using the same technique. So I'm just going to click right here and then hold down Alt right there, just like that, so that I can have multiple cursors. And then all of this will have a class name of font bold, like that. Okay, looking very nice. Let me see if there's a way I can display this even better. Let me go inside this list items, right? And I can say class name of flex. Oops, does that mess up anything? And it does, which I don't want. I don't want this right there. I want the list items. So this list item, and then this one, and then this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So let's say class name of flex items center and justify. Oops, what am I typing? Justify between, which should now push this to the end. So let's save this, and we'll have this. So the street, it's much more readable. And of course, let me add some more margin on each one of them. Where is it? Justify between, and then let me add margin on each one of them, margin on the y. So margin on the y, let's say 3, which should now just push it out just a bit. As you can see, looking very nice. And just to make it even better, let me add more margin on this, and you can see this is the offset that we're getting, and then this is the description. So you can see that Miss Adriana Castillo is at plus 330 GMT from Tehran. Okay, wait, is that GMT or what? I don't think it's GMT anyway. It might be. Okay, let me just go to this div, right, give this a class name of margin top, let's say 10. Push it down just like that, looking very nice, very nice, very nice. Of course, now the only thing that remaining is now just to deal with this date. So how do we format this date? Well, we format this date by going with our date right here, right? So we need to use moment to format our date. So in order to use moment, we actually need to import it. So I'm going to import moment from the package is called moment, like that. And then in order to use it, now I just want to go inside right here and then call moment. So place more curly brackets and then call the moment, call moment, like that. And then moment, because it's technically a method, it needs to have some parameters inside it. And because I want to use the variable of date, I want to use the variable date that we have right here. So in order to access this value, sorry if you're realizing there are a lot of cut edits, my voice is going out a bit. So we need to access this value from the date, which is technically a variable. And we can do that in JavaScript by using template literals, which are just backticks. So you can just say backticks like that. And the backticks is available, it is the left key on before 1. It's the key before the number 1 on your keyboard. And then once we have our template literals like that, they're called template literals, we can have a $sign and then curly brackets, which means we can now access the value inside there and say date like that. And then once you do that, then you can call the format method like that. So in which way do we want to format it? And I want to format it in terms of month, date, and year. So month 1, 2, 3, 4, date like that, and then year 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, just to show you the problem that we'll have if you just pass in this date as date like this. Oops. Let me just save that and see what we'll have. It will say invalid date. Where is it? It says invalid date. So technically there's nothing that it's accessing from this. So in order to fix that, you just have to have template literals. So just do this, call your $sign and just say date like that. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? There you go. Okay, I had 2 curly brackets. The reason why it says invalid date is because moment here takes in the date as a string. Okay, it takes in the date as a string. Let me just open it to show you moment, if I can find it. It takes in the date as a string, as you can see right there. So it always has to be a string so that it can format it. Okay, and then once it formats it, once I save this, then you realize that it should now return the date, as you can see. So the date of birth for this guy was August 9, 1980. And you can play around with moment in any way you want. It's very nice, it's very simple to use, as you can see. And yeah, I think that will be it for our entire application really, because you know, it just, oh, we need to scale it up. I've just remembered, we need to scale it up. So I'm going to start scaling it up at about let's say medium screens. Okay, so Tailwind CSS has some inline media queries that we can use. So I'm going to go inside here and I'm going to say for medium screens, so for MD I want oops, what am I doing? It's not here, it's not here. It will display badly. So on bigger screens, what I want to happen is I want this to remain at the top, right? And then I want this div and this div to display side by side. So we can do that by going into, let me just confirm this. This is our main div, right? This is the image, and then this is the div for the details of the person. So where do we start our data? Right here. Okay, so what I want to do is this div, which has our contact details right there, plus this div which has our list items, I want all of this to be inside one div so that I can display flex on them, right? So I'm going to grab this all the way up to here, cut it out and just place it inside another div like that. And then on this main div, let me just see where it starts. Oops, that's the wrong one. This should be it, right? So on this main div, I can go here and say class name, and I want this to only apply on medium screens. So I'm going to say for MD, I want this to display flex, and watch what happens. We have this right there. Now technically this is not what we want, so I'm going to add another media query, and I'm going to say well, remember this has some margin on the top, right? So we just need to find this right here and add another media query right there, and I'm going to say for medium screens I want the margin on the top to be 0, which should now reset it, as you can see right there. And then I'm just going to say right inside here, I'm going to oops, don't do that. I'm going to say here for medium screens I want to justify between, like that, which should push it to the end. Looking nice, and it's already responsive as it is, but I don't want this to go all the way to the end. So I'm going to add another media query on this div right there, and I'm going to say that for large screens I want this width to be 75% of the screens, so width 9/12, which is 75% in Tailwind CSS. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I want this, I keep confusing this, I want this to be on this div, is it? On this div, right? This is the gray div, so just paste it inside there, which should reduce this. Is that correct? Did I save it? Okay, there you go. So it's reduced it, but then again you see another problem present itself where it's aligned to the left and not to the center. So in order to fix that, you just say large screens and just say the margin on the x-axis should be auto, which should now recenter it. What's happening? It's taking a while to reload, I don't know why. Okay, so it centers it like that. And I'm going to add another media query for 2XL screens, so let me just do that. So for 2XL, so for extra large screens, I'm going to say the width should be 50% of the screen, so width should be a half, so 1/2, which should be this, like that, which is much more readable. And then let me add some padding on the x-axis for this, so it just goes inner just a bit, and that padding can be found, where was the padding on the x? Oh, right here. And I'm going to say that for 2XL screens I want the padding on the x to be 10, which should push this inwards, inwards like that. And then now all we need to do is now just fix this at the bottom, because I don't want this space. So in order to fix that, remember that we want the dark gray background color to have 100 viewport heights on big screens, right? Let me just check where this starts from. It starts from about medium screens, right? So for medium screens where this space starts. So I'm going to go inside this section right there, and I'm going to say that for medium screens, then I want it to take up 100 viewport heights, and the class for that in Tailwind is hScreen, like that. And look at that, looking very nice, so that even if you go to big screens, then you no longer see the what's it called, the space right there. Okay, so now the only thing that's remaining is now just to commit this to GitHub, right? So we can just go to github.com. Oops, oh, my internet's out. Oh no. Okay, that poses a challenge. Okay, so my internet's out, so I can't really show you how to create a repository and commit it from GitHub. But technically, once you go to github.com, let me just outline the steps for you. Let me close this, close this. Oh, the theme color, remember the theme color. I need to change the theme color. So let me inspect this. Let me just figure out what color this is in terms of hex. 111827. So go to index.html and change this to 111827, like that. So you can close this, and we can close this as well. So let me just add this. Let me just add commit.txt. So the first thing that you need to do is create a GitHub repository. And of course, you will need a GitHub account if you don't have a GitHub account. So once you create a GitHub repository, just name it whatever you would like to name it, and don't place it to private, and don't add a readme because it will be replaced with this readme from React app. And then you can just say, for example, if you named your repository random user, for example. Don't call it random users because I called mine, the one that I showed you in the beginning, I called it random user. So if you had your repository called random user, the path to this would be https github.com and then your name. So username, for example, whatever your name is, you would place there. So in my case would be St. Thomas, and then it's called random user.git. So this will be the path to your repository. And then you would have to say you would have to go into your terminal, right? You'd have to go into your terminal and say git add all, which will now add everything because npx create react app automatically initializes git repository for you once you create it. And then once you do that, you can just say git commit and say random user generator, like that. Let me see if it's back. Oh, it's back. So you can do this. So once you follow these two stages, it's very easy. So let me just go to GitHub now, right there, and then I can create a new repository. So just create a new repository, call this repository random user app, like that. And then once you do that, just create a repository directly. All right, and then you can see this is the link that this is the link to your repository. So just copy it, just click this link to the clipboard, and of course you can see that all the steps to commit to GitHub are outlined below. So this is basically what we are doing. Because React app automatically initializes a Git repository for you, then we don't need to do this. That's why I skipped this step. But we've already done git add all, so we have added everything in our application. And then git commit, so we need to commit, which we have just done, git commit. And then we need to do git branch -m main. The reason I'm not going to do this is because I've set VS Code to automatically be on the main branch. So if you have a branch right here like master, that's when you'd have to do git branch -m main. And the reason why this is important is because GitHub recently changed the main branch for every repository to be the main branch. So if you want to make changes to your website, for example, if you have your website source code on GitHub, then it would have to be the main branch. So once you do that, you can now say git remote add origin and then paste the link to your repository. So I'm just going to copy this. So git remote add origin, so git remote add origin, then you're adding your everything to your repository, and then just say git push -u and then origin main. So it's pushing it upstream to your main repository. So once this finishes, once it finishes like that, you can now come and reload this, and you'll notice that your repository is now available. Now take note that I'm going to delete this repository because it's basically the same thing that I had with my other repository called random users. It's basically the same thing, but I think this one is actually better. I think this application is much better in terms of the overall look and feel of the application. So I might delete the other one. I'm still trying to figure it out. But yeah, I think that will be it. I can now delete this commit.txt. Don't need it. I think that will be it really. Thank you guys for watching, and please remember to subscribe. I realize that most of the people who watch my videos are actually not subscribed. About 75% are not subscribed, so please subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.